him.
Right. Yeah.
Looking back on it, but still a great year for him. And I mean, WrestleMania 19 was so huge.
Yeah. Now, Brock had a great year, and overall, you just had so much talent still there. Especially on SmackDown. SmackDown was an awesome show, and even on Raw, I thought on Raw, Jericho really carried the brand. He had multiple feuds at the same time with Shawn Michaels, with
Yeah.
even Scott Steiner and so many other guys, RVD. Just little feuds that really kept the Raw brand interesting, and then he had the highlight reels, and I thought Jericho was entertaining as hell in 2003, definitely. And
Can't believe you mentioned Scott Steiner on a top 10 years.
well, that was one of the bad things about 2003 was some of the challengers that Triple H went through. I think they just did this to get buy rates. They tried to get the most out of him. Triple H went through Steiner, Nash, and Goldberg. Goldberg actually did win the belt, but we just saw a lot of bad main event matches with Triple H, and people thought Triple H's title reign lasted a little bit too long.
Right.
But at the same time, I thought he did make the title seem important, and we were dying to see who would be the guy to take the belt off.
It was cool.
Triple H.
It was cool to see Evolution started that year, so
Yeah.
it was kind of cool. And Goldberg is much as people don't like some of his quality in the ring, he was pretty sweet when he came in for that Elimination Chamber at SummerSlam,
Right.
and he basically bulldozed over everybody. I had never seen it happen. I didn't watch WCW, so watching it, I thought it was really cool to see Goldberg come in. I thought it was really sweet. And if you didn't like that, like you mentioned before, that same SummerSlam, you saw a fatal four-way between Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, Rhino, and Tajiri. And so that was SmackDown talent. You saw some great in-ring SmackDown talent, from just that main event alone throughout that year on
Right.
SmackDown.
They brought back the U.S. title. You had Benoit and Eddie for the U.S. title
That
at
was a great
Vengeance.
match.
They started the brand-only pay-per-views, which a lot of people didn't like, but we still got to see. The SmackDown ones were really good at that time. Also you had Benoit and Angle. They started feuding out in 2003, and I thought Benoit and Angle from the Rumble. I think that's the greatest match of all time. So that's just me. And
That was a great match.
the Brock Angle feud, I think, could have been a lot better. It was good, but it seemed like when Kurt Angle came back from the neck surgery and turned babyface, they just never really seemed to know what to do. I don't know. It just didn't seem like the fans were really behind either guy.
Mhm.
I don't know. Maybe they should have kept Angle heel in retrospect. They couldn't really get either guy to play the babyface too well because it didn't work out too well with Brock. And
That's
then
true.
when they turned Angle face, it was kind of lukewarm. And see,
Yeah.
the problem with Kurt Angle as a babyface in the WWE, it always started off really hot, but then after like a month, it would just die the fuck out. So Angle had a tough time after the neck surgery. He never really fully healed from it, and he was always going back and forth with the neck problems. So I guess that's pretty much it. Also, I just thought the Kane storyline was pretty cool with him unmasking and him lighting JR on fire and acting like a psychopath. I thought that was pretty cool during the summertime.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned. I wanted to mention real quick as we talked about 2004 in the beginning. The seeds for Benoit and Guerrero having success in 2004 were planted in 2003 with the Kurt Angle match for Benoit at Royal Rumble, and all the success that Benoit and Guerrero had in 2003, all the great matches they were having. Eventually, someone back there has to go. These guys deserve to be in the main event, and they got it.
Eddie was entertaining as hell. That's
He made the Michael Jordan face in the Vengeance match. After Rhino speared Benoit, Guerrero looks at the camera like Jordan did in the 1992 NBA Finals.
Right. Yeah, Eddie was just he was a heel, but that's when he started to do the lying, cheating, and stealing stuff. But playing behind the referee's back and all that stuff.
It was hilarious.
So yeah,
hilarious.
Trying to think. All right, so I guess that pretty much sums up 2003. Overall, was a mixed bag. I would say that if you're looking at the pay-per-view quality of 2003, it really wasn't that good, to tell you the truth. I mean, you had some great shows, but you had some pretty really bad title matches as well. But television match-wise, they did deliver a lot of great stuff, including the Angle and Brock Iron Man match. And obviously SmackDown had a lot of great main events that year as well. So let's move on to 1998, number 6. What do you have to say about 1998?
1998 was another marquee year for the WWE. I think this was the year when people started to see what was going on in WWE, and they started to pull away a little bit, create some breathing room from WCW. I think 1999 and 2000 were the years where it was like, oh, now they're really pulling away from WCW. But 1998 was that first year where it was like, okay, WWE is back on top. Stone Cold Steve Austin, had the title for the first time, and that was another big title reign, probably closely matching what Shawn Michaels did in 1996, where every pay-per-view, it was up to Steve Austin to draw the crowd, to get the crowd into it. And he didn't have to do that much. Once that music hit and the glass broke, that was the Austin era in full swing, 1998. He had matches against Dude Love, Mick Foley, Kane in the First Blood match, Undertaker at SummerSlam. He was doing everything to make that product what it was. You also had D-Generation X in full swing as faces for the first time after WrestleMania 14. Triple H brings out X-Pac and D-Generation X. They become faces. He had a great ladder match, very memorable ladder match with The Rock at SummerSlam. And there you go. You can't not mention The Rock when you have 1998, The Rock being a heel. He was funny. He was great on the mic, and that was planting the seeds for him having probably the biggest career in the history of the WWE. Just a lot of great things going on that year.
Would you say that Austin was more over than the Ultimate Warrior in 1998?
Yeah,
yeah,
of course. I mean, because the Warrior had
I think it's close though. I mean, some people want to forget, just how popular Ultimate Warrior was.
He was big, but I think a lot more people. Austin didn't just have the kids. Austin had everybody.
Everybody. Well, let's not forget, 1998 was Stone Cold Steve Austin's.
And
year.
remember, it's interesting because the people that were cheering for Ultimate Warrior, they grew up,
right,
and they didn't want to be little warriors anymore. They were working class people who were going to work. They were making $7.50, $8.50 an hour. And they go to a show and they want to see Steve Austin kick Vince McMahon's ass,
right,
because their heart was in that.
Right.
They were like, I'm tired, I'm pissed off, I want to see someone get their ass kicked, and that's what Austin brought to the table.
Right. It's one of the bad things about the year was Shawn Michaels. Hurt himself in the casket match with Undertaker. So Shawn Michaels in 1998, that was pretty much his darkest moment, WrestleMania 14. But on the bright side of it, I thought you still had some really good wrestling matches. Unlike 99. 99 was pretty much just storylines. I believe Vince Russo booked 99, so it wasn't really a lot of people thought it was kind of crappy from an in-ring standpoint. But 98 had, awesome moments with Austin and Mike Tyson. Some of the stuff that Austin did with Vince McMahon with the, what do you call it?
Austin McMahon feud?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That whole year was about Austin versus McMahon. McMahon was the puppet master, and everybody that Austin fought, even Undertaker, it was all orchestrated by Vince McMahon. And looking back on, like, when I watch it now, I'm not a huge fan of it, but at the time, it was just a great formula. It was a great formula for them to work with, going against the face. And ever since then, if you look at anybody that they tried to push as a face, Kurt Angle, John Cena, now CM Punk. And they're all trying to mimic what they did with Austin McMahon. That had such a huge influence on WWE storylines for the rest of the WWE history. And that's why one of the reasons why that year was so important.
And it's pretty unbelievable what Austin did, because he couldn't really do much in the ring, because his neck was really hurting him from the Owen Hart piledriver. But he just made up for it because he was just booked perfectly in the storylines, and he had great intensity, and I don't know, he was just on fire without even really doing that much,
Absolutely.
And let's give Mick Foley credit as well. I think the Hell in the Cell, taking that bump off the Hell in the Cell against Undertaker really. I think that really set them apart from WCW. Like, oh, this is where this is the fucking promotion to watch, right?
Absolutely, because when you turned on that TV, if you saw a commercial for WWE, even to this day, you see that spot when he gets thrown off the cell, because that was huge. He was putting his body on the line for the company to make an impact, and he did it. And they needed that, because besides Austin, I mean, yeah, sure, you had some good mid card wrestlers. You had Ken Shamrock, and you had the New Age Outlaws. You had stuff going on,
Right.
but to really put them over the top, Mick Foley, really, took one for the boys. That wasn't the only good match he had that year. The matches he had against Austin, he is putting his body on the line. He's being backdropped onto the concrete,
Yeah.
and he continued to do that. He planted the seeds that year for the success he'd have in '99 when
Right.
he won the title.
Yeah.
He had his feud with The Rock.
He really connected with everyone, just like Austin and The Rock did that year. I mean, definitely Foley in '98 was a really important year for him. But also in '98, the WWE became more adult oriented. You had some of the stuff that Sable did. That was some of the most talked about stuff that the company did that year when Sable. She came out with that bikini.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, she took her top off and she just had like the little tattoos.
Right.
I think that was
It was
98.
becoming very sexually oriented.
Yeah.
You even saw characters like Val Venus, and I think Terry Runnels did some edgy things as well. So yeah, the demographic was like strictly adults. I mean, if you watch SummerSlam '97 and then compare it to SummerSlam '98, you'd see such a different atmosphere in the crowd alone. Just the overall tone of the crowd. It's just much more edgier. So yeah, that was 1998.
Yeah.
All right, number 5, we're going to go to 1992. This is one that you really love.
Woo! 1992. We mentioned Ric Flair before, how he came in at the end of '91 with the World Heavyweight Championship, and he was making a big deal with that. I love that. And then they just carried that into 1992 when Ric Flair won the Royal Rumble and he main evented WrestleMania 8. Well, almost, with the championship match against Randy Savage. I just thought having Ric Flair for the first time in the WWE, having him become champion, having him be the top heel in the company, that was just a lot of fun for me to watch. Even when I was a kid, I was like, who is this guy? It was something new. And Vince McMahon didn't really dumb down Ric Flair's character, and maybe a little bit from like his Four Horsemen stuff with the suits and, I'll take you home and make a woman out of you. But you know what? He still did all that stuff with Elizabeth. I mean, he was, saying that he was having sex with, Elizabeth. This was actually pretty edgy for now. We just talked about edgy Attitude Era. Jump back 6 years earlier. You got Ric Flair talking about he's sleeping around with Macho Man's wife. That wasn't happening, in the late 80s, in 90. That stuff wasn't happening as much. And this was also a great year for Shawn Michaels. And it's always fun to talk about these years when these characters started to come alive. Shawn Michaels threw Marty Jannetty, his tag team partner from the Rockers, through the barbershop window. It was so intense. It was so good. It was so perfectly timed. He rips apart the magazine, and it was things like that. If you ask me, it's almost like the seeds for this edgier TV where the heel stands out and makes such a huge impact were actually planted back in 1992. Right. Unfortunately, we didn't really see it flourish until much later.
Right.
But we had some good stuff going on there.
Yeah, when I think about '92, I think that the one match that stands out is the Royal Rumble, right?
The Royal Rumble, yeah. You saw all those characters come in. You had a great roster, in that Rumble. You had Flair, you had Michaels, you had Bret Hart.
Friggin' everybody. Hogan, Shawn Michaels.
The Undertaker.
Jake the Snake Roberts,
Roddy.
British Bulldog, Roddy, yeah, Piper in '92. That was probably Piper's best year in the ring. He had his best match against Bret, and he was still there. So you definitely had the star power from the '80s mixed in with a lot of up and coming guys like Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart from the '90s, and it just made for a really compelling roster. People would say the '92 roster is arguably even better than the 2002 roster, which is I think that's saying a lot. Let's not forget about Bret Hart and British Bulldog. Bret was making the transition from IC champion to world champion. Mm-hmm. But when you say like the end of '92, you would kind of see a decline. Hogan left, Flair was on the way out, and it seemed like by the end of '92, Bret was pretty much just there by himself, right?
It did feel like that. It was a little scary. It was almost like, oh my God, you guys, built all the stuff up, you did all this work, you had this great roster, and now it's almost like, Bret Hart is at the top, kind of standing by himself. And then later on they brought Yokozuna in for, but that's '93, you know, when all that stuff happened. But I still think it was a good year because you mentioned the Bulldog match that was great for the Intercontinental title, and then when Bret Hart won the championship, the Heavyweight Championship, I'm sorry, the WWE Championship, he fought Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series. So you started to see Shawn Michaels come into his own